Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the 8th episode of Rowen Reports with Dr. Robert J. Rowen. Today, we welcome back Dr. John Parks Trowbridge for a follow-up on last week's invigorating conversation. Let us know what you think in the comments of this video, and if you'd like to support this podcast directly, Dr. Rowen is now on Patreon. You can find him there and visit our generous sponsors by following the links in the description below. Now, I would like to leave you with some words by Marquise Lafayette. When the government violates the people's rights, insurrection is, for the people and for each portion of the people, the most sacred of rights and the most indispensable of duties. Before we jump in, we would like to give a special thank you to our sponsor, PROMOLIFE, bringing you closer to the benefits of ozone therapy. Proudly rooted in the USA, PROMOLIFE is at the forefront of assembling ozone therapy generators designed for both personal and professional use, right here on American soil. Meticulously handcrafted and precision calibrated, each ozone generator speaks quality and reliability. PROMOLIFE has simplified the ozone therapy process by offering a complete line of high-quality accessories that allow you to use ozone in ways you never thought possible. Don't miss out. Explore the entire collection of cutting-edge offerings at www.promolife.com/ozone. Make sure you use the coupon code in the description of this podcast for an exclusive discount towards your journey to enhanced well-being. I am also excited that our friends at shopc60.com are helping to sponsor this video. If you haven't heard of C60 before, also known as Carbon 60, it is a powerful antioxidant that helps to optimize mitochondrial function, fight inflammation, and neutralize toxic free radicals. I'm a big fan of using C60 in conjunction with your keto or intermittent fasting lifestyle to support the immune system, help your body detox, and increase energy and mental clarity. If you are over the age of 40 and you'd like to kick fatigue and brain fog to the curb this year, visit shopc60.com and use the coupon code in the description for 15% off your first order and take control over your health today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 8th episode of Rowen Reports with Dr. Robert J. Rowen. We have back on the podcast for part 2, follow-up on our conversation from last week, Dr. John Parks Trowbridge. We had a great conversation, had a lot of positive feedback from the audience, and felt everyone would benefit from a part 2 conversation here. Actually worked up a list of questions I'd like to go over with you and just get your perspective on a few things going on in the world here today. So first, welcome back, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So without further ado, I'll just get right into my questions here. I had written these down, so I'm just going to read them verbatim. In 1990, the Texas State Board of Medical Examiners charged you with false advertising in connection to non-surgical facelifts, chelation therapy, and cytotoxic testing. What came of these charges?
That's an interesting situation. The advertising they were concerned about was a brochure, and I had put photos of 2 women that had before and after pictures of their non-surgical facelift. And during the initial hearing, the invitation that you first get before they really want to slap you around, the investigator said we were not even sure that the picture of the lady on the front of the brochure was the same as one of the ones on the inside of the brochure. So I took that as a compliment, and I said, thank you. I mean, I thought it was a pretty damn good job. So in any event, they did not mean that, because they decided that what I was saying, even though it was not there, was that you would lose years of your life. It would be, backtracked years. No, it was simply the appearance of the aging changes would be, controlled. And, well, they just decided that I was too much of a problem with that. So they did actually decide to have an administrative law judge hearing. That's the real formal stuff where they are planning to be mean and nasty with regard to a penalty. So we go to the hearing, and of course I have hired an attorney firm in Austin. Actually, kind of a funny side note, I had originally hired an attorney who had worked with one of our organizations, our integrative medicine organizations. And you might remember Robert. And he said, you should settle this case because it'll cost you a lot of money to defend it. And I said, well, obviously you're not the one to defend it for me with me, because I'm not going to agree to that I have lied, because I have not lied. I have not made any misrepresentation. No, we're going to follow this one all the way through. So I hired a firm in Austin that had done many cases for the state medical board. And we arrived there in middle of the week for the hearing with the administrative law judge. And as we're starting the hearing, the attorney for the board notified my attorney that they had dropped the charge that they were offering about cytotoxic food allergy testing, because they were just dropping that. Okay, so we didn't have to present a defense on that. And then we did the rest of the hearing with regard to the I call it the phase 2 non-surgical facelift. It was really quite remarkable. And they brought on a plastic surgeon from Austin who said, that he was most disturbed because my brochure was clearly misleading and fraudulent and so on. So my attorney listened to all of this, and then he gets up to give his cross-examination, and he says, so in your estimation, you can see what is fraudulent or misleading by whatever Dr. Trowbridge wrote. You don't have to see anything else. No, it's just whatever he wrote. And so he says, so when he wrote, does this or that or the other, then that's false and misleading. Oh, absolutely. And he read several quotes from the brochure, and then he kept reading quotes, and absolutely misleading, false, fake, et cetera, et cetera. He says, doctor, I'm kind of confused. The last 5 quotes that I read to you that you said are false and misleading are from brochures that we got in your office. Well, that kind of brought that presentation to an end. And it made it very easy for the administrative law judge to conclude that this had been a setup. So that left the chelation therapy questions that they had raised. And they brought in the executive vice president for Blue Cross Blue Shield in Texas, and he claimed that he had done chelation in years past, and definitely that I was misleading and so on and so forth. And I had brought in 4 long file boxes of documentation in support of the things that I had done. Lots of papers on chelation therapy and toxic metals. Chelation is a very simple thing that's used in nature. This is the way that nature holds on to metals. Like the green in plants is chelated magnesium. The red in blood is chelated iron. This is a very useful way of moving minerals around. So all we're doing with chelation therapy is providing medications. They're actually, FDA approved drugs, okay, that grab hold of abnormal, toxic, heavy minerals inside your body and escort them out. And if you get them out of the way, then lots of your body processes dramatically improve. They just function better because they're not being interfered with. They're not being weighed down by the heavy metals. So the evidence presented by the Blue Cross Blue Shield executive vice president, he's very important, really was just his opinion on things. And so my attorney said to me, okay, I'm going to ask you questions, okay, and if I want more information, I'll ask you for that. But if I ask you such and so, and the answer is yes, you just say yes. And if I ask you and the answer is no, you just say no. And if I want you to expand on that, I will. So we went back and forth. And, this is actually very good courtroom behavior for a witness, because you don't, step into something that you shouldn't by trying to elaborate. And so we concluded that basically the administrative law judge could get amplification on the answers that I had provided by reviewing these 4 file boxes of medical literature that I had brought along. And so the hearing concluded. And then it comes to the time of presenting his findings to the board. This, I think, is a very laborious process. It's kind of like Supreme Court decisions where they read every page of the decision. And so he shows up at the medical board meeting and he literally reads his 45-page report. Okay.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm serious. 45 pages. He reads every page. And periodically, or at the end of that, board members ask a question, well, what about such and so? And he stops them. He says, I'm sorry, doctor, but you did not charge me to investigate that. You cannot ask that question. And what will harumph, right? And another one would ask a question and he'd say, I'm sorry, but that question is not under consideration at this point. You did not put that in your original concern, your charge. Well, it went back and forth. And finally, the best thing that happened was the rice farmer's wife. And you go, why was that so good? Well, we have several rice farms around Houston, and the rice farmer's wife had been appointed to the medical board, and she had a particular not like for me, and that had been expressed several times. Well, in any event, she excused herself from the board meeting to go to the Texas football game in Austin, where we were. Okay. So then the motion comes to convict me, and it is lacking in 1 vote to make it a tie. If it were a tie, then the president of the board would vote, obviously, to convict me. So the next motion was to exonerate me, and it passed because it was 1 vote shy of having, the conviction there. So that was it, and it was done. It's like, okay. So the football game really was the most operative thing in my defense. It's kind of crazy. And when you look at things like this, I wouldn't think justice works like this. And I don't really think that's justice. I just think that's the operation of, administrative law. So nothing came of that.
I got a question for you, John.
I'm sorry, but you didn't put that in the charge for the administrative law judge to review, so you can't ask it. What is it, Robert?
Had any natural person filed a complaint against you for chelation therapy?
Apparently, the only ones were physicians. In Texas, the board receives complaints, and then the board presses the charge. And so, although, the idea is that you have the opportunity to confront your accusers, your accuser is the board. So identities are neatly shielded, and the best we can find, doctors have done it.
I know you're a legal mind, and Lucas is going to be asking you some legal stuff. But here you're saying the accuser was the board. Now,
Yes.
I'm facing something very similar in my state. You know that. And
Yes.
it's no secret to my public what the U.S. government has done to me and what the local medical board has done to me. But it's also no secret that right now I am in federal court in San Francisco on a Title 42 action. Title 42 is violation of civil rights. And where do our civil rights come from? In other words, you know that it's in the Constitution. There are certain enumerated protections in the Constitution.
Right.
Where do they come from?
Well, the ones in the Constitution are, from our Creator, and that's the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The other rights are more inferred, and especially they are because they're not listed. That the state has any business in them. They cannot interfere with them at all. The confusion comes when they conflate rights with privileges. Privileges are established by the legislature, and they give you certain, you've got this new right, but it's really a privilege. But a privilege involves an obligation. A privilege places on you a duty, and those who fail to perform the duty may have the privilege removed from them. That's part of the way that works. You cannot remove an inalienable right as noticed in the Constitution.
Okay. Where is that actually memorialized in writing that was drawn into the Constitution?
Magna Carta.
Restate that, please.
He got it. Lucas got it. We have the Eighth Amendment that says no cruel and unusual punishment. We have the Fourth Amendment that says no warrants. We have the Fifth Amendment that says due process. We have the Sixth Amendment that says all criminal trials will be held by a jury, etc., etc. Lucas, you got it right. It comes from the Magna Carta. Now,
okay. So what you're saying is these rights were brought forward in English law and memorialized in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was a very interesting problem because several of the states said, no, if you don't have these guarantees, we ain't joining up.
That's correct.
And that was a stumbling block for a while. People, I think, in the Constitutional Convention did not really realize how deeply held those beliefs were, and thank God they were.
So the protections in the Bill of Rights largely come from the Magna Carta. And that's where it was first put in writing in English law. And the law of this nation was, and at least in California, still is English common law. Now, we've lost a lot of common law. In common law, if I don't hurt you, nobody can do anything to me. I have to impose an injury on you,
Right.
and then you bring the complaint, and then there's a trial. Did I really do this, or did I not do it? Well, I'm going to go back to your licensing issue. You told me that your accuser was the board.
Right.
Now, I'm going to tell you that something that comes out of the Magna Carta, which is now in my federal civil rights case. No sheriff, bailiff, or constable shall bring pleas of the crown. To put it in common words, it means that the crown cannot bring its own pleas.
Mm-hmm.
The accuser has to be you, John, or Lucas, or somebody else that I've injured. The crown cannot bring its own complaint.
Maybe.
And then
concerned that when you bring in sheriff and other enforcers, what it really means is that the enforcement arm of the crown cannot bring charges.
Exactly.
They might argue that other aspects of the crown can and will.
Basically, the crown cannot bring pleas of the crown, especially in a criminal case. Now, another aspect of this is the Fifth Amendment says...
I have to interrupt you because the way it's done now is we have the criminal. All we have to do is find his crime.
Exactly. That's what's happening now. And
Right.
the government is the one that says, you were the criminal. You,
Right.
John Parks Trowbridge, you're the criminal. So let's put the crime in. Well,
Right.
that's a violation of fundamental rights.
Right.
That's a violation of officers of the crown cannot bring forth pleas of the crown. And the medical board are officers of the crown, and they brought forth pleas against you. Now, in my own case, I have fought the government on tax matters. And on podcasts, I've said, I didn't lie, cheat, or steal. You can't prove that I did because I didn't. And it's all in the record. But the government came after me anyway. So the medical board, in my case, because of a matter in a foreign jurisdiction, the federal jurisdiction, this is a contract between me and them in a foreign jurisdiction. The medical board is coming in, and they now are the accuser in a matter that has been adjudicated. And the accuser there, the federal government, that matter's over. They've been paid in full. Everything's done with them. So now I have the local government, the local crown saying, oh, you were a bad boy over there. We're now going to take your ability to make a living. That's in the Magna Carta as well. Penalties shall be proportionate to the degree of the offense, but in no cases can you take away a man's livelihood. Why? Because he's going to resort to crime if you do.
Right. He either becomes
That's
a warden.
now in my civil rights. That's now in my civil rights case.
Okay. My concern is that they don't care.
Okay. Of course, but that's not the law. But of course.
Well, ask Supreme Court justices about invasion of a freely associated compact state, and they go, "Oh, you can't defend yourself." Our thought is, try me, because we've kind of put up with enough at this point. The deal is,
well, I know that was going to be one of Lucas's questions.
Good.
You live in Texas. Your state is being invaded, and the rest of us are being secondarily invaded. Lucas, you had your question lined up for him about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good segue. I do want to just quick comment on the conversation you guys just had, and that saying that even if you're not convicted, the harm comes in having the indictment, having the charge brought against you, having your name smeared, and it's in your case. Thankfully, you weren't convicted, but I guess I wanted to ask what fallout did you see? How did that negatively impact you and your career just by having the charges brought to your name associated with that?
Well, the slogan, Lucas, is you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride. And the reason is because you have to spend hours and hours and hours. You have to hire consultants and attorneys who are premium because you can't afford to let this go anywhere. You are out the money, and it's interfering with your ability to clearly, think and develop and do your job, because everybody thinks that medicine is done in the few minutes that you're facing the patient. That's just an introductory time. Doctors who do integrative medicine, like Bob and me, we muddle this over, and we go, oh, wait a minute, I see how that might work. And we come back to the patient record and look at things, and sometimes propose a different test or a different approach to a treatment or something. That is interfered with because your preoccupation is with just surviving the attack. And attacks are very expensive and demoralizing. And when people hear about it, well, it's kind of like Trump. Trump was colluding with the Russians. Of course, he wasn't, but it doesn't matter. He's been smeared, and that just keeps coming up and keep coming up. Who knows how many people have not come to see me because of or have not come to see Robert because of the, that's always the thing, he's such and so, without any evidence or understanding. They just don't have it. That, I think, is one of the most serious long-term effects. People get sued for malpractice, the insurance company pays, and they go away. The cases that are brought against us are lingering and are vicious. Literally, they're vicious because they ignore the black letter law. Black letter law means you look at it, I look at it, and we both agree, yep, that means that what it says. They just keep marching forward anyway.
Yeah, not to make this political, but we're probably going to get pretty political here anyways. But Dr. Rowen, I'll let you jump in. But I just want to comment you see that a lot with Trump right now. All these indictments coming at him. Throw anything at the wall, see if anything sticks. Obviously, some convictions are coming out, but like the real estate appraisal situation for his estate down there in Florida. What a ridiculous charge to be spending taxpayer dollars fighting. But anyway, so I'm done.
Nobody claimed to have been hurt. But I just want you to remember the number 46. That's the number of states that could still indict Trump. Okay? 4 have and 46 more could. They're not going to, but anyway. And all of this is...
Lucas, okay. Lucas, one thing you might not be aware of is that medicine is often practiced for the medical board and not for you.
Yes.
It's called cover your ass medicine.
Mm-hmm. Defensive.
John, do you have another defensive medicine? Do you have another? Okay, but that's basically what you're doing. You're protecting your butt from problems. So you spend extra money. You may do extra invasive things. You may do things that are not in the interest of the patient. And this goes on more than you can imagine.
Yeah, I know just from personal.
You've seen it? You've seen it. Is that right, Lucas?
Yeah, just personal experience. Go in and like I had a major sinus infection. I go in to get checked out, and they're like, "All right, well, you need a COVID shot, you need antibiotics, you need a Z-Pack, you need," and then the list goes on. It's like, this is just a cold. I just wanted like a nasal spray or something.
Well, okay, but I have to tell you, when I am practicing defensively, I tell patients, I don't actually think I need this for me, but it has to be in the chart. And you don't necessarily have to listen to everything I say. You can decline the information, but I have to offer it just because it has to be there defensively.
That's one of the big... we have a very sad state of affairs in this country in the disease maintenance industry. It's not a health industry.
What it is.
It's a disease maintenance industry. John and I are one of the old timers in this field. We go back to the early 80s in this. And I almost quit medical school, John. In my 3rd year, I almost quit medical school because I came to see that what we're doing to the patients is exactly what we're doing to the planet.
Wow. I almost quit practice in my 2nd year because I said, this isn't helping. Okay.
You saw it early, and people ask me, well, how is it that you saw it and the other guys don't? And I don't have a good answer for that. What is it that made us different from the other guys who are roped into the farming the people for profit?
Robert,
I'd say most do see it.
Well, I think most people, or many people, go to medical school to help people. I mean, I think that's really an motivation, and it pays well, so that's okay too. But it doesn't pay as well as retail. I mean, the president of the Woolworth store makes Well, they don't have them now, but the Sears store makes more money than the local doctor. But people don't understand that. But the deal is, you go through medical school and you learn the trade. Okay, you learn how to write the prescriptions, write the orders, do the assessments, and whatever. And then you realize that what you're doing doesn't really help people all that much, but you have a little bit of a problem. You owe a few $100,000 for going to medical school. You have the new fancy car, the new fancy wife with the new fancy car, the new fancy house. And you go to yourself, if I stop now, how do I pay for all of this? And so you're kind of stuck on the merry-go-round, grabbing the brass ring instead of the gold one. Robert, do you think that makes sense?
It does make sense to a degree. I want to go a step further. I took the Hippocratic Oath. I presume you did too.
Yes, we did.
Today, the oath is to evidence-based medicine, scientific medicine.
I have a problem because they ignore the science, but that's okay. The publication that really definitively shows that masks don't work is the CDC journal.
Right. But we were compelled to wear masks.
Well, the man on television says you have to.
Absolutely. I practiced very well the 180. You go in, they say you need to wear a mask, and I go, I shouldn't need to. Well, you need you to be in here, so I just leave. I'm not involved with that. Thank you very much.
I want to throw out one more legal issue, and then I know Lucas may have some other questions for you. Your medical license, because this almost happened to you, the medical license is property. Correct? The Supreme Court has ruled that these licenses are actually property. And I believe it's the Fifth Amendment that says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It might be the 14th Amendment as well. So when they come after you to take your license by the executive branch, so it's the executive branch, the board, coming after you with pleas of the crown. So the crown is coming after you with an accusation before their judge, their tribunal, and they're going to take away your livelihood. Doesn't that sound like a violation of due process to you?
Well, if they cared, Robert, but what? So we don't confuse people. The executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, those are the three branches of government. The legislature writes the laws, the executive enforces or executes the laws, and the judicial determines whether or not there have been violations of the laws, including in their enforcement. Well, when I say the administrative law judge, he's not in the judicial branch. He's in the executive branch. When I say the medical board, they are prosecuting not as a prosecutor before the justices or the judges in the judicial branch. This is in the executive branch. It is all in that little tiny nubbin that they use to, lean down on people. The charges are preferred not by someone who's been harmed. Tort law is wonderful. Tort law is, you injured me, I get to sue you. And now we go to a jury which looks over the evidence and such. And the judge really has no place whatsoever except to make sure that the rules are followed. You can't sneak something in that doesn't meet the standard of evidence or rules and such. Unfortunately, we have very activist judges who move everything in the direction of what they want to happen. And so, the administrative law judge is effectively no different from a judicial judge, a quote, justice judge, because they're doing their thing. And if you don't believe it, Go to the most recent Supreme Court case. Really, I mean, I'm going to bring this up, Lucas, right now. I understand that the Rio Grande is the border for the nation, for the United States of America, okay? And the only other thing is that it's also border for Texas. Well, okay, now let's assume that the feds refuse to protect the border for the United States of America. It has nothing to do with Texans because we can move in 100 feet and say, all right, this is Texas. We're going to protect Texas right here. And effectively, the feds have zero interest in anything. They have no authority. In fact, they should be, well, Robert knows where they should go. But anyway, the thing is that federal operatives, federal agents operating in the state of Texas are actually out of their jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a very, very interesting thing. It cannot be claimed and it cannot be waived. Jurisdiction simply is. And jurisdiction means that you are of a status or the activity is of a status to which jurisdiction adheres, applies, okay? And if they're not doing something on a federal waterway or, rivers and things like that come into their jurisdiction, then they don't have any business on the land.
Their business is at a boundary, a line.
That's
Their
correct.
business is if it crosses from here to here, that's their business. But once it crosses,
right.
Once it's crossed, they're out of it. Their jurisdiction is only at the crossing point.
Well, they will wrap in the destination and the origin because they'll say that's part of the transfer across the border. But quite honestly, there is no reason to have all of these cases in court if the law is properly applied. People think the legislature's dumb. I think the legislature is actually pretty smart. I think they write what we want to a large extent, or at least what they're able to get through of what we want. The problem comes when everybody wants to put in shades of gray and go, well, and then you end up with all these obfuscations and curious definitions and whatever. It's like, wait a minute, how'd that happen? Like Texas does not have the authority to defend the Texas border because that is one of the 50 freely associated compact states. The compact is the Constitution. The state is Texas, and in the law, in the federal law books, the states are referred to as countries.
Yes,
that's what they are. They're choosing to be freely associated in this compact of the Constitution to be represented in international affairs by the United States of America.
That is correct. That's how the nation was founded. And most people have lost sight of the fact that states are foreign to each other. They are foreign in law to each other, and they are foreign to the United States. And the United States, like a cancer, has moved in to the interior of the states, and like cancer devours you on the inside, we have a cancerous federal government, a creation of the states that is devouring the innards of the state.
So what do you prefer, radiation, chemo, surgery? What? The problem is to get them to stop because, my famous slogan is they have the badges and the guns and the judges and the jails. That makes it hard to extirpate the cancer, okay? I ask people, what is the jurisdiction of a U.S. Marshal? A U.S. Marshal comes up and says, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Is he in or out of his jurisdiction?
Well, that depends. If he's in Washington, D.C., he's in his jurisdiction.
Correct.
If he's in Yosemite National Park, he's in his jurisdiction.
Okay. How about if he's on a federal outpost of some kind.
Well, maybe, and maybe
Right.
not.
It depends on whether the land has been ceded to the United States and accepted by the Congress. Okay, then that is actually federal, not state. And I think Pennoyer versus Neff, wasn't that the case on that? Well, there's cases, there's excellent
There's a
case
lot
law.
of cases on that. There's case after case, and it's in federal statutes. I think it's Title 41.
Right.
That if the land has not been ceded, CEDED,
Mm-hmm.
if the land has not been ceded by the legislature and the United States government accepting the jurisdiction, then it is in the hands of the state.
Right. So
believe me, that's going to be one of the things that I will be raising in what the federal government did to me. Because I was not in Washington, D.C., and this place where I'm sitting right now is on land that was never ceded to the federal government. And yet they came here and handcuffed me in my own home outside of their territorial jurisdiction and hauled me out of the house.
Now, each of those actors actually was acting outside his commission, his jurisdiction, and is personally liable.
I know. But they have the guns, John.
The badges and the guns, the judges and the jails.
And they came in with guns.
Oh.
Onto land, and incidentally, if you read the federal rules of criminal procedure, which is law, their jurisdiction to arrest you is on federally controlled lands owned by the federal government with their jurisdiction. The law specifically says you can serve that person in the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Where you're looking at right now is not in the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Yet they broke in here onto lands not ceded to the federal government, but under the total criminal jurisdiction of the state of California. And they did these things in violation of their own law.
Well,
you and I have been standing up.
There are very few federal crimes.
Piracy, counterfeiting, and
treason.
Treason. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three federal crimes. And you may not know this, but if they want to bring, and I'm not going to get really into it much here, but I know this has also been filed in another case, so it's not hidden knowledge. If they want to bring charges against you, John, they have to go to the DA. Did you know that?
They have to swear out an information or present evidence. That
before your local DA.
Mm-hmm.
How many times are they doing that? How many people are rotting in federal prison right now? And I met some, you know that, who were rotting in federal prison right now where they did not go and swear out a complaint before that man's local DA.
Well, that's just
99% of them.
Unnecessary step. Unnecessary. What is
that? We don't have to do that.
Well, take a look at January 6th. Talk about speedy trial. Talk about a presentation of the evidence. Yeah.
A lot of those people from January 6th, they weren't even given all of the evidence. There's videos that would have absolutely exonerated them, and they were withheld.
Yep. and that is, it's not Braxton. What is it? Brannerton, whatever. It's a violation because you have to be given all the exculpatory evidence by the prosecution. If it's in their hands, they know about it, they have to give it to you, the defense. But they also have to give you a speedy trial. They also have to give you, presumption of innocence. And yeah, I'm not sure any of that has really happened. Now they're talking about arresting people who were outside the Capitol. Okay, good. They were in a federal area.
I met someone at a political rally a few weeks ago who was on one side of the barricade, and the Capitol cop had let in people, and he was on the outside of the barricade. And all he was doing was he was protecting himself from being abused by officers. He didn't strike anybody, and he's now facing felony charges and long-term imprisonment. There were people who did violate the law there. Absolutely. Trespassing on government property, I would call that a crime. But what happens when the Capitol Police officer removes the barricade and welcomes you in? Do you know any better? Is that willful intent to commit a crime?
I'm pretty sure that's not trespassing. Trespassing is the unauthorized crossing of the border. And I'm sure people committed crimes there just the same way. You could probably go to any major sporting event with 80,000 people and find folks who are committing crimes there.
Now the whole movement is labeled the same way.
Exactly.
Before we jump back into our discussion with Dr. Trowbridge, I want to give a quick shout out to PROMOLIFE. If you haven't heard of them before, they're leading the game in ozone therapy, crafted with care right here in the USA. Their ozone generators are top notch. Beyond that, they've got a full lineup of accessories that truly opens up the world of ozone in innovative ways. To support this podcast, check out what they have to offer at www.promolife.com/ozone. And as a little perk for our listeners, there's an exclusive discount code waiting for you in the podcast description.
So, Robert, I am worried that we appear to have lost the courts. If you've lost the courts, the game is over, basically. There's you can put up all the stories and defenses and such. The only thing you can do is try and lead your life really clean and give them no reason to apprehend you, approach you, whatever.
Oh, they can make it up, John. They approached you with your medical license. There was no complaint against you. They came at you. So if we've lost the courts, then we're facing officers of the crown bringing pleas of the crown that's going to be tried by the crown. And then the crown is going to decide, maybe you'll still have a right to a jury, maybe. But then you have that man sitting there that filters what the jury is going to hear.
Did you hear Trump's lawyer recently, where she said the judge said, give me the list of questions you're going to ask him, give me what he is going to say in response, and no, you cannot bring in these witnesses, and no, you cannot raise these defenses. Excuse me, wait a minute. The judge is prosecuting the case.
Yes.
The lawyer said as well the judge was dictating how he should answer certain questions as well through the trial.
Well, I hope he answers them that way, because you don't want him guilty of, pissing off the judge, for Christ's sake. Actually, this might be a good segue, Robert, because a couple of years ago, Stephen Barrett, one of your favorite friends and mine, Quack Watch, he's a quack buster. I, of course, am a quack, 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 quack. He wrote an article that he published on Quack Watch that took to task the various aspects of my practice and such. And he then filed the essence of those complaints with the Texas Medical Board the next week as a complaint, a citizen complaint. Of course, he's a physician, and he's not a physician in Texas, and he was not a patient of mine, but he's complaining kind of, on a catch-all basis. He'll represent everybody, right? And told the board they should investigate. So the board opened an investigation on the basis of receiving the complaint from him. Well, it was really strange. Okay, of course, been there, done that. Didn't like that rodeo. Hired a really great attorney. Turns out the attorney that I hired had been a junior with the law firm that I was dealing with in 1990, as Lucas was asking, and then has gone on and really become, very, very well skilled at dealing with administrative stuff. But they pulled some interesting things, like they wanted my patient list of appointments in January. Oh, okay. I said, what are they looking for? He says, I have no idea. Okay. Getting the list, then what they wanted was the accounting of payments and charges for those patients seen in January. Oh, okay. What are the, he said, I have no idea. I've never seen it. Okay. And the state board attorney, who is, gathering this evidence and such, never actually gathers any evidence about the fundamentals of the complaint, which regarded, population therapy and claims that I made, which were outrageous and such. That's what basically Stephen Barrett said, as I was misleading everybody and so on, or claims that I made about the yeast syndrome. Well, that's a pretty substantial book, since I haven't recanted one word of that. And it was published in 1986 and it's still being printed by Bantam Books because it keeps selling. And then he made the claim that I was basically handing out exemption letters, medical exemptions for people who did not want to take the COVID vaccine that's not a vaccine. And they basically gathered no evidence on this. I mean, literally none. Meanwhile, I am spending hours and hours developing, defensive materials for my attorney. He says, I know that you developed this particular thing, or whatever, that you are the originator of a particular part of this treatment protocol. I need to have materials from other doctors who are endorsing it. Oh, Lord. Okay. So, I went around getting all that. Well, on Friday before the hearing, this is in November, 14 months ago. On Friday, we're kind of going over the materials and what it's going to be like and so on. And he gets an email from the board. The board attorney, who had been dealing with this since January, had been relieved, and there were 2 new board attorneys for the case. Okay. He said that's unusual. Okay. So on Monday, the hearing is supposed to start at 9:15. I'm in his office so we can talk directly to each other. Board hearings do not happen in person now. They're on the Zoom, Okay. So 9:15 comes, 9:30.
I wonder if that's really facing your accuser. If you're on Zoom, are you really facing your accuser?
Do you want to put that question out for them?
that, then die of the COVID.
But continue. I'm listening.
So 9:30 came, now the 9:45. 10 o'clock comes. He goes, this is unusual. And I go, they must have had a very complicated first case. It's okay. 10:15, nothing. 10:30. So 10:45, the hearing starts. And we're introduced to Stephen Barrett because he was given the opportunity, as a complainant is in Texas, to have 10 minutes to present his concerns to the medical board. So he does. And he basically goes down his complaint and then tells the board, now, if you'll look at this, I'm sure you'll find that. And if you do this, and so he's telling the board how to do their job. Okay. And then the thing about him saying that I'm just freely providing these medical exemption letters is that he apparently used a fraudulent name and claims that he was given a medical exemption by me. The problem is we never got the fraudulent name. I never saw his payment. That is a report. A report is charged as a report form, and I never saw a payment from him. And in order to write a medical exemption letter, I review your chart. And sometimes I have questions, and those questions have to be answered and so on. And then I will provide the information. So it's kind of interesting. He does this under a fraudulent name for which I would not have a medical record. I don't know how he got the letter. I don't know what he did. But in any event, my hearing officer was the president of the Texas Medical Board. And his real concern during the follow-up after that was, do you provide letters or reports to patients who are not, or people who are not patients? Nope. Do you ever do that? Nope. Have you ever done that? Nope. And I mean, he was really concerned that there be an established doctor-patient relationship in order to provide a medical exemption letter. I thought it was pretty reasonable. They didn't have any questions
I think it is too.
They didn't have any questions on chelation or the yeast syndrome because there was no evidence presented by the board that would substantiate any of the claims that Dr. Barrett was making. So after the head of the board satisfied his curiosity, they went into their little private session and came back and said, well, there's no substance to any of the allegations and you're free to go. Okay. Of course, as Lucas raised the point, that took almost a year, a lot of money, a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of aggravation and concern and worry. Robert, as you say, they are looking at my livelihood and whether or not I can still ply my trade of being a physician. And of course, Dr. Barrett has, said, I don't like Trowbridge, you shouldn't go to him. And anybody who has read that now, that's being smeared across the world, just like the fact that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, even though there is no fact that he colluded with Russia because he didn't collude with Russia. But it doesn't matter because if Stephen Barrett said it must be true about me, whatever.
I will say I did some digging. I did some digging on medical reviews for you, patient reviews, and the only negative review I could find was that your office takes too long to answer the phone sometimes. Other than that, 4 or 5 stars, happy patients. But Stephen Barrett obviously has otherwise to say.
I worked out a phone answering system, and if you want this, press this number. If you want that, press it. I had it all methodically worked out. And I said to the staff, I said, my concern, and they said, what? And I said, I think if someone calls us, they want a real live human answering their questions. And they said, well, yeah. And so we never instituted it. If it takes too long, it's because we're busy on the phone with others.
Yeah.
Or busy taking care of patients. That's interesting. Thank you for that report. I appreciate it. The problem.
Lucas, you had some other questions too, didn't you?
Oh, yes. But I wanted to point out that the problem that we have, Robert and me, is we do the unreasonable thing. I have a delightful patient who came to me almost 4 years ago with ulcerative colitis. And of course, he has been on nasty drugs because this is where your gut is fighting a battle with you. It's turned against you. It's very painful, very uncomfortable, lots of limitations and nasty drugs. And we got him we got him just dramatically better, and he actually is graduating from college this spring, and we've coached him on how to live alone and take care of himself. He's done an awesome job with support of his parents, which is just really great. So what do I see a few months ago? A fellow who comes in with Crohn's disease. Now, similar to ulcerative colitis, they're virtually the same in many respects. But, in my surgical career, we used to operate on these patients with UC or with Crohn's, and we just take out the offending parts of the gut. The offending right then, because as more parts offend, then we have other operations where we take out more. And then there's these nasty, nasty drugs that we use. And I said, I don't particularly like the way that they're treating you. And the family said, yeah, we don't either. Said, so will you allow me to kind of set the stage for maybe avoiding that? And this young man, within 7 months now, is dramatically better, off the nasty drugs. The only things he's taking actually are for control of the yeast syndrome and nutritional supplements and dietary guidelines and so on. And Robert, if we try to tell people we do that, that's unbelievable. Huh? You don't know. If you do that, why isn't everybody doing that? Well, they're not doing that because they're not, dealing with first and second year medical school with physiology and pathology like we are. They're dealing with the second and third years, which is drugs and surgery.
And that's what medicine has become. We've had clients come into the office very recently, and they're shocked that someone is listening to their heart and feeling their belly.
Yes.
They say, you're actually conducting a physical exam?
Doctors don't touch their patients. We have tests.
Yes.
X-rays, CTs, MRIs.
How far medicine has come.
Whoa. Yeah. I had a patient about 3 or 4 years ago, a very interesting shoulder patient. And Robert, some of those can be very complicated and very interesting because you've got to treat the right part if you're going to restore normal joint function and so on. And so I asked her, so I said, okay, you see what I've been doing here. When the orthopedic surgeon examined you, what did he say was his finding on that? And she goes, he didn't touch me. No, I mean, when he did his physical exam, when you went in to see him, what did he tell you was going on? She said he just ordered an MRI. He didn't examine me.
Well, I'll tell you how bad it is. Many years ago, maybe 14 years ago, I had a problem with my knee and it clunked. And I broke down. I got an MRI. It did show a problem. It showed a degenerating meniscus in my knee. And I went to get an opinion. I decided I'll go to an orthopedic surgeon, get an opinion. He didn't touch my knee. He knew I'm a physician. He didn't touch my knee. He just looked at the MRI. But I have to give him credit. He was really honorable. He said, if I operate on your meniscus, your risk of chronic arthritis will be no better or worse than if I don't operate. I said, thank you. At least he was honest. He didn't examine me, but he was honest. I paid his bill and I treated it myself. You know what I would treat it with ozone and some other things.
Right.
And a year later, I hiked the John Muir Trail without a whimper from my knee.
Love it. Well, Robert, I think you need to understand that there are people like you who just, it was a misdiagnosis. You really didn't have a problem. You really just got better. And congratulations. And that's how they dismiss what we do. They say, well, the patient really didn't have that.
It's true.
Well, if they didn't have
You're
that,
getting a good look at the
drugs.
Lucas is getting a good look at the inside of the Church of Modern Medicine right now.
Yes.
If a
Yeah.
woman has a breast cancer, and lo and behold, it's disappeared. The lump disappears in a year. Oh, you didn't have cancer. It was
It really wasn't.
misdiagnosed.
Right.
The
Well,
biopsy was misdiagnosed.
right. You know, Lucas, they want to talk about preventive medicine. So they want you to get your mammogram. Mammogram is not preventive medicine, it does not prevent breast cancer. In fact, it probably encourages more breast cancers than it actually detects. But it is
Yeah.
not preventing, it's not preventive medicine. Preventive medicine is assessing the patient's condition and situation and looking for how the nutritional status will reduce their risks for developing cancers. That's preventive medicine. But the insurance companies don't pay for that. So, you know, you have to have a certain outlook as a patient, you know, in order to believe that that's worthwhile. And also, you know, there's an interesting situation with that, Lucas. When we take a drug for a problem, we often can see a result of having taken it. So there is, you know, it worked. But when you prevent something, it's kind of like we don't thank God for the tornado that does not strike our house when the skies are blue. And that's what preventive medicine is all about. The idea is to keep you from ever encountering that if possible. And I have to tell you, I really think in most cases it's possible. I think many situations, cancer is directly associated with fungus. And in many situations, well, let me use the example I offer about COVID. Okay. Why did all these millions of people die across the planet? I think there's three reasons. Well, you know, this is a nasty influenza, and there's we can get all sorts of talk as to where it comes from and whatever, but I don't think nature really does that. But it's a nasty flu with a death rate less than the actual flu itself, the real flu we see every year. But in any event, people are dying because they have nutritional deficiencies, they have toxic metals and chemicals,
They're
and they're suffering.
diabetic, obese.
Pardon me?
They're obese and diabetic.
Well, sure, but they're also suffering with stress. Okay, and given these situations, uh, that was just an ideal bug to get released into the general public. Now, why do I say that? Well, because you know, in my practice, my patients all had dramatic reversals of their quote COVID symptoms within 1 to 5 days, because they each had a very specific nutritional and medicine program designed for them, for their concern. They'd say, you know, I have a positive COVID test. And I don't tell me, I don't care, because even the CDC says that test is fake. Okay, so
Yeah.
don't fiddle with that. Just tell me your symptoms. Tell me what your exposures have been. Tell me how things have been going, and then let's work through a personalized program for you. But several million people around the planet did not have a personalized program and did not have enough vitamin D3. And that
Speaking
is
of fake
specific. If
COVID tests,
what's that?
I said speaking of fake COVID tests, back
Yeah.
in 2020 April, right after COVID was a thing, and all these PCR tests were coming out. I got real sick. I'm like, oh well, I might as well make sure I'm not going to die from COVID. I went and got tested, and they billed my insurance $900 for that test. I had to pay
Oh, I
10%,
hope so.
$90 copay.
Oh my
Oh, I hope so.
God.
Yeah.
Nine
You
hundred
got to make money.
dollars for a test that probably cost 50 cents to make in the Philippines.
Maybe that much.
Well, I did a nasal swab for what? $9? Holy crap, Lucas.
Yeah,
Mm.
this was when it was all real novel. No one had any idea what was going on, and these tests were brand new. And it came back positive, and they're like, "Well, you gotta do this, this, and this." I didn't do any of it. I went home and I changed my diet up, ate good soups, and tried to get outside as much as possible. But even that, it took a month to clear up for me.
Wasn't there an Australian legislator who tested Pepsi or something right there while he's speaking, and sure enough, it tested positive on the PCR? Yeah. Hey, that tells you don't drink that stuff. That's spreading COVID. But the vitamin D3 numbers are very interesting. This came out about, I'm thinking, almost 2 years ago now. If your vitamin D3 level was above 30, you were not likely to die from whatever this thing is. If it was above 50, you probably would not even get sick enough to require admission to the hospital. And most doctors are aiming that you have vitamin D3 somewhere in the 20s, because that's what they understand is appropriate for people with, bone loss, osteopenia, whatever. Actually, we routinely reverse osteoporosis and osteopenia by the proper, nutritional fix and all this good stuff. But that's not in their literature. There is real factual literature out there. Don't let people think that everything in medicine is fake. Only 90, how much percent? I don't know.
Oh my God. When I first met you in the 1980s, John, something came out from the Office of Technological Assessment that
Yes, yes.
80% of what goes on in doctors' offices is not scientific. And we were one of the ones being called quacks.
No,
Do you remember that?
Lucas, this is really funny. This is a formal Office of Technology assessment report, and they said, we've looked at everything. There is no factual basis, no scientific basis for literally 80% of what's being done in the offices. So
Yeah.
why is it done? Well, that's because it was done before, and
Where's
now
the
I'm doing
money?
it now.
Follow the
Ev-
money.
ev-
My mantra is we are being PHARMED. We are being farmed for profit.
Well, that's why those tractors sell so well,
Yep. Digging
Uh,
us up. Just digging us up, plowing us over for profit. Lucas, do you have any other questions? We've been on for over an hour again.
Yeah, I have two questions. So, real quick, I just want to go over this is back to the Texas Medical Board. 1998, they found you in violations of laws regarding using patient testimonials in advertising. So, I didn't know that you
yeah.
couldn't do this. That seems like a logical thing to do, like, oh, this patient said this really good thing about my care. Maybe you
Mhm.
could experience this as well. That makes sense to me. But apparently, it's against the laws in Texas.
That one's kind of a funny one, actually. What I was doing was printing patient stories. The scene of they came to see me, and then this is what we did, and this is what happened, this is how they felt. And I didn't actually even write it. I had my PR person call them and go over it and everything, and I just saw it and just edited it to be sure it was, factually correct. And they said, well, you can't do that. And I said, geez, I have heard doctors all over offering, these kinds of, endorsements and stuff like that. Everything. Well, you can't do that. And I said, well, I'm kind of confused. What is it? And then they said, well, the law says you can't have these endorsements. I said, I thought that the law meant that I can't have, some TV star say, hey, I like Trowbridge, you'll like him too, go see Trowbridge, okay? And they said, no, that's an endorsement that is different. And what you're doing is you're publishing these patient testimonials, okay? So the testimonials can't be done. No, huh? Everybody in Texas does testimonials and endorsements now. I mean, this is just because that's the way the media works, right? And so, in any event, I had the go around with the board on that, and I sued the board, and actually '95 was the genesis of it, and they were going to go ahead and go to trial with me on this, okay? And then in '99, my attorney gets a call. A new state board attorney has showed up, and she's trying to clear her desk. And she has him come in and talk about this. And she says, we think we should just go ahead and fine him $5,000 and write a reprimand, and that'll be reported to the National Reporting Service and everything. And that way we'll just clear this up. And he said, oh, I'm not sure you actually know the doctor, because I think he would rather pay me to fight you over that than to pay you that. And she said, well, he says, I'll go talk with the doctor about this. Okay. So he calls me up, and I said, what do you think? And he says, I want to go back there and talk with her again. I says, I think we're making real progress. Okay. So he goes back and he talks with her. And he calls me and he says, all right, so here's the lay of the land. There's no fine, and there will be a reprimand that will be in your record. And that, of course, will be filed with the national whatever. And I said, and he said, I told you, just wait, just listen to me. He says, we get to write it. I go, I write my own reprimand. He goes, uh-huh. And he says, they will edit it. If they don't like something, they'll strike it or whatever. And then we get to review it again. And if we can both agree, then that's it. And that's it. And I said, okay. I said, so what'd she say about the lawsuit? And he goes, that didn't even come up. I go, no tit for tat on this? And he goes, I'm not even sure she knows there is a lawsuit. I said, okay, so we just write a reprimand and they go away. And he goes, yeah, pretty basically. But our lawsuit still stands. He goes, yeah, pretty basic. So a few months later, the clerk of the court says, so on this lawsuit, you either prosecute or drop it. They're trying to clear their calendar. This is hanging around. And so I said, what do you think? He says, let's go ahead and just let's drop it without prejudice. This is where I get my legal education from all this things happening. I said, what does without prejudice mean? He says, that means if they resurrect this issue at all, we resurrect the lawsuit. It goes right on from there. I go, oh, I like that. And so, I hadn't heard from the board in 20 some years until this Stephen Barrett thing came up. Oh, amazing. Happily,
it sounds like
I have not.
Stephen Barrett might have had an agenda on you.
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. Well, actually, the Quackbusters back in the '94 or so on were actually putting out a score sheet on how bad these integrative medicine doctors were, and my good friend Bob Atkins scored a 10, and I was beyond pissed. I said, "What did he do to get a 10? I only have a 7. Why does he have a?"
That was so bad, because if you'd have gotten a 10, you'd have done a lot better. More people would have come in for you.
but it's like, I'm at least as bad as he is. Come on. But couldn't get my score raised.
That's free advertising, glass half full advertising.
Exactly. Robert?
Lucas, what other questions you got?
I just I want to wrap this up, kind of bring this full circle, coming back to the border crisis we have going on. So 12 days ago, January 17th, 10 retired FBI directors and experts in counterintelligence sent a letter to congressional leaders warning that Biden's border policies have facilitated a soft invasion into the U.S. of military-age men coming from terror-linked regions, China, Russia. Since then, there's been escalating court battles between Governor Abbott and the Biden administration, and many people feel that this could segue the U.S. into civil war. And I know we talked about this a little bit. Just being a Texan yourself, what are your thoughts on these events? Kind of something to wrap this conversation up with as well.
Robert, you want to speculate?
Oh my God, that's a tough one to speculate on. I personally think that we have been teetering on civil war, even aside from this. If Biden wants to take everybody's guns away, my own belief is, unlike the gold confiscation of 1933, if they come for the gold today, there'll be blood. If they come for guns today, there'll be blood. I don't think the people will tolerate it. And with regard for what's going on at the border, I believe that most people have had enough of this, including immigrants who have come in. All of the immigrants I've talked to who have come in, who came in legally, and they said, this isn't right. So are we going to head to civil war? You know, I think Biden has pushed us closer to civil war than any president, not only in living memory, but let's go back 170 years ago. The nation is highly polarized. They blamed Trump for it because you have to have a bad guy to pick on. But in truth, there wasn't any substance there. And these guys are doing everything that they alleged Trump and their bad guys did. They're actually doing it, but blaming them. And I think people are waking up to that, but I hope it's not too late. And I want to hear what the legendary professor has to say about this.
You have summarized it very well. My concern is, in the old days when we started really looking at this, Robert, and speculating on how bad this is getting, we didn't realize that 24 states would sign in favor of Texas. You know, when they add that up, half the states are saying, feds, wait a minute, that's half of the freely associated compact states. This could get really mean really quick because the feds do not have the endorsement and support of the people. They are really out of bounds. I mean, you know, when you take a look at how many, we do not honestly know, 10, 12 million, you know, trespassers. They're not illegal immigrants. They're trespassers, okay? But we don't know 10, 12 million in the last few years, of many of them males of military age, and they are somewhere. Are they, you know, sleeping cells, ready to do whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a large group to have to go against. The federal government, as I understand, is now building cities for them.
Yes.
Okay, now that's an interesting thing. If I were a police officer and you said, go in there and do something, I ain't going in there. That's like
Well, that's
Somalia.
what's going on in France.
Yeah.
In France and European countries, there's Islamic areas where you can't go in.
Go. They're little Somalia, okay? And if the cops won't go in, then what you have is warlords and gangs, and pretty soon after they finish ripping each other off, they go, you know, there's a lot more stuff in the communities out there. Why don't we go out there, grab it, and come back? That is a tripwire. I don't think people are going to support that very well, okay? And that could happen not just in Texas, but all over, because
Yeah.
I mean, we have not absorbed all those multiple millions ourselves. They're elsewhere. As a matter of fact, Robert, I need you to kick in some money to my GoFundMe here. I've decided to try and hire 48 large buses that will two every hour will go from Eagle Pass to Washington D.C. and drop them off, because obviously D.C. wants them. I mean, that's what Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett said, and the other guys there. Well, we'll take them from here and drop them there. 2 buses every hour for 24 hours continuous, and then the next 24 hours, and the next 24 hours, and the next 24 hours, because that's what we are being. We're backed against the wall on this.
I'm really pissed at your governor, Greg Abbott, because he should have done that 3 years ago.
4, 5, 6, yeah. Yeah, I understand. I consider that politicians have 2 fingers. One finger they raise to check the wind, okay, and then the other finger they raise to, do us in.
or
And
one of these fingers.
yeah, I am very frustrated that politicians should be 110% supporting what we need. They're there to guarantee our rights and protect them. Okay. And instead they're off, I don't know what, apparently they're off making a lot of money because several of them in the Congress critters have become very wealthy. But the point is, why is that border open? It violates the law. You know, everybody says, you're heartless. You're heartless. You know, the United States admits over 1 million legal immigrants, not trespassers, but legal immigrants every year, which is more than the entire rest of the world combined. So we're pretty heartless, all right.
So we have, to me, Lucas, we have those who, what we commonly call leftists, who are supporting this type of thing and waving the evil flag at people like Trump or other people who are simply saying, are we a nation of laws or a nation of men? And we're very rapidly degenerating into a nation of men. Screw the laws. They don't count. We will pick and choose which ones we'll enforce. We don't have to enforce this if we don't want to. The same thing as the monetary system. We
Right.
don't have to coin gold and silver coins. We're going to impose this freaking fiat currency on you. And I told you last week when I pulled this out, who owns this? Whose property is that? I just pulled it out of my wallet.
I think they put their name on it, didn't they?
It's theirs.
They claimed it.
It's theirs. Now, who owns this?
Well, say that's gold in your hands.
That's a $5 United States gold coin. This is my property.
Right.
Lock, stock, and barrel. I own it in the common law. I can defend it. You can't defend this because you don't own it. So they get involved. But you own the real money. Am I making sense, John?
Well, actually, the money is always the root of the disintegration of law. Always. Because if someone finds a way to connive and get money, there is no law. And that's the real concern anymore is are people going to settle for devaluation of their money? And you know, you talked about fiat currency. I'm worried about fiat digits.
CBDC, central bank digital currency. Well, look, you own nothing now. You own nothing now, but you do have a modicum of privacy, a modicum. When they have CBDC, how are the politicians going to hide the prostitutes they're going to when they have to pay them in CBDC, which can be traced?
No, they have a better way. But you know what bothers me is this cancel culture, which we have tolerated for years now. And you remember I said politicians had that one finger where they check the wind? Okay. But they also have the finger where it goes, whoop, and you just disappeared.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but no, you don't have any money in the account. No, you don't have any. You're gone. It's that easy if we have digital currency. And if it's a fiat digital currency, we're done. We're all done.
And that's what they're trying to put in really quick. Lucas, that's what they're trying to do very, very quickly. That's what the World Economic Forum is all about. This is, to me, this is evil. This is the absolute physical manifestation of a spiritual evil that has descended like a cloud on the planet. This is my belief. I believe it's happening. Is it too late? No, it's not too late because people are awakening. Is it fast enough? Are they awakening fast enough? I don't know.
Classic battle of good and evil. You are 100% right. And if evil is able to take away our sustenance, you know, we started talking about our livelihood and such, but they can take away our sustenance by a simple bump. We just turn your accounts off. No, you don't have anything. That's not going to bode well for the American people. Certainly not for Texans.
And Lucas, you're a lot younger than us. So you have a lot to look forward to,
Mm-hmm.
or to try to get it as far away from you as you can, because we're well more than twice your age, and you're going to have to live with this. I stuck my neck out. Look, Trowbridge is a freedom fighter as well. He has fought the good fight. I fought the good fight. And, if you can't leave the world a better place than you walked into it, then what has your life, what master have you served? And
That's
both
so
of
true.
us are trying to leave this world a better, yeah. I want to serve the real master.
When
John?
people finally get it's good and evil, we will have people starting to stand in the faith, and that is where the power comes. That's where we can reestablish the republic, where the laws are for us and the government protects the laws for us. We'll see.
I think it's going to have to be a not just nationwide, but a worldwide movement, which if
Yes.
for those in the audience who aren't aware of what's going on in France, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the farmers' riots in France, because it's escalating quickly and there's no coverage. No one wants you to see the revolution. They want you to be isolated and in the dark.
We have a controlled press. I think people are awakening to that because they saw it with COVID, but things are beginning to change. Look what happened in Argentina, the election. Look what happened in Holland, the election. Look what happened with the Brexit vote. So where there is a true, honest election. Now the question is, are we going to have an honest election? Can we have an honest election? But I do believe that the people are getting the picture, and it's not too late, but it's heating up really fast.
Well,
48% of the planet's voting this year. So,
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
In France, they
this
can
is a
count.
major election year.
Cool.
Biggest in
In
recorded
France,
history.
Count 32 million ballots, that day. But for some reason, we have a hard time counting 150 or 200 million ballots in 7 weeks till we really find out how we need to stack it in order to push come on, guys. Paper ballots, this one, that one, this one, that one. This is not very hard, but the voting machine makes it very easy. So, interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Professor Trowbridge.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Dr. Trowbridge. If you found this conversation inspiring, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, stay safe and be well.